Thank you, Mr. Rookie. I've never used this one before. I forget what it is. Probably some lobby music for Octo expansion. It's not Metroid, it's definitely from Octo expansion. Hello, Chara. Toph, I'm surprised. I would assume you'd be the one person who would know what this music is, since you're such a fanboy of Splatoon stuff. Hello, 9. I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm so excited and looking forward to this that I'm just now writing out what I'm going to actually talk about. I'm getting really good at procrastinating at this and getting away with it. Much like high school. And college. Except since you guys are here early, I'll give you a cool little stat that I may or may not bring up today. So I'll bring it up now. Kings and Starburst have played each other 4 times across 2 different majors. Twice in Super Jump, twice in 20XX. In both those tournaments, they met in winners semifinals and grand finals. Their record head-to-head against each other per game: Starburst and Kings. In winners semifinals, they are tied at 5 each. 5 wins for Starburst, 5 wins for Kings. Kings winning a Game 5 in 20XX, Starburst winning a Game 5 in Super Jump. In Grand Finals, though, when those 2 teams have played against each other, per game, Kings have won 11 times, and Starburst has won twice. So what's the difference there? Why are they competitive against each other in winners semifinals, but seem like they're in totally different divs when it comes to grand finals of these tournaments? I think the answer is stamina. Starburst not used to being challenged that much, whereas Kings playing in Japan probably are challenged in every tournament that they play in. Starburst definitely has some issues running out of gas because they are not competitive at all in these grand finals. Whereas they seem to be dead even with them in winners finals. Also, I guess it's worth noting, none of those winner final matches were streamed. But it's not like Starburst isn't used to being on a big stage. That's just something I found interesting. So somebody tells you that Moray Towers is the reason North America can't beat Japan. No, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that our high-level teams just aren't being challenged. And maybe just aren't as interested. And then when they finally get into a situation where they have to kind of grind it out, they're not ready for it. Get stronger after 3 a.m. I made that argument. There was a team that won low ink from Australia that lost in round 1 of winners and made a run all the way through losers, forced a bracket reset, and won in a final game 5. And I made the case that as the tournament goes on for them, the sun is rising, and that kind of re-energizes them. That might play a role here, but yeah, they got 3-0'd in 20XX. In Super Jump, Kings won 4-2, and then in the bracket reset, Kings won 4-0. Yeah, like you wouldn't even put those 2 teams in the same div unless you could avoid it, just by looking off of that kind of stats alone. And yeah, I'm kind of cherry picking here. I'm only using 2. I don't. The spot, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Gimmick tournaments, Roundy, those don't count. You know that. What, are we going to throw in Battle of the Brushes, too? Might as well. Kings didn't do too well in Battle of the Brushes. And that's your interesting set of the day that I will try to weave into the actual broadcast if it's relevant. I think it might be. Oh, yeah, I didn't even look at the Area Cup thing. I saw Kbot tweeting about it yesterday. But I didn't really get to look at it. See, a good podcaster would have looked at that before having Kbot on today, but that's what you get when you do your things on Mondays. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Popcast. Whenever you're listening to this, whether it be live or a VOD, Twitch or YouTube, or Spotify, while you're changing your IGN to something that is borderline inappropriate, clowning on other teams for losing to low-ink teams in an open invite tournament, realizing that the new Tri-Slosher design is actually the beta design it had in Splatoon 1. Whatever it is that you're doing right now, appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this. Unless I don't. Hey, this is the new time. I wasn't kidding. Last week wasn't just a Memorial Day special. This is now the consistent time the Popcast is going to be. So if you're here, you're watching it live, and you like the time that it is right now, good for you. If you are a part of the fourth of my audience that used to watch me live in Europe, if you really did love me, you would stay up super late to watch me live. Otherwise, you can just watch the VOD on YouTube, as a good chunk of people like to do. But hey, we're here, and this works out a lot better for me. We'll just say that. I'm a big fan of the 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time slot that they got here. News of tournaments that may be of interest to the casual listener of the podcast. Minnow Cup is going to be no, not this upcoming weekend. No, it is. This upcoming weekend. The 11th. Man, we're blazing through June already, aren't we? Clan Blitz Edition this time around. So this upcoming Saturday, Minnow Cup. The weekend after that is Low Ink, the 18th and the 19th. And the weekend after that, the 25th is Little Squid League number 21, going back to their standard format, one-day tournaments. So every weekend from now until the end of June has a name brand low-level tournament that isn't something somebody pulled out of their butt like we've seen recently on the Send Out calendar, and is something that may be of interest to the initial target audience of the podcast. But I understand a lot of high-level people are here, and you're banned from everything I just listed out. Don't worry, there's some stuff coming down the pipe for you. Today, we're going to be looking at a ton of tournaments that happened over the past weekend, including a new tournament that was created by a team that made Gamma Bracket in last Low Ink, that was open invite, and was everything that I have been banging the table saying we needed to see from low level. It happened last weekend. It was successful. We're going to spend some time talking in depth about it. But first, we are going to move here. We got to find a way to get Kbot into a VC that isn't occupied by somebody, so that this is not so cringe. So let's hang with me here. Can we do this? Can we do this? Come on, Kbot, get in here. Boom. Are you here? Is that working?
I think so.
It did. We made it work. Welcome into the Popcast. A head TO from Low Tide City, a recent graduate from Ohio State University, and a man who claims to have only played in 3 tournaments in Splatoon. I guess in
Excuse you,
Splatoon's
sir.
history.
That's the Ohio State University. Thank you very much.
The
Get that right,
State.
please.
That my bad. Okay, look, how many people in Splatoon actually know to put the in there?
Probably not many. Probably not many.
A lot of interesting topics were discussed on Twitter last week. As usual, we try to turn the attention to somebody else because I talk about these things almost weekly, and I see people talking about it on Twitter, and it's just like, we're just going to continue to have these conversations. So let's bring in a different voice, or maybe not a different voice. I think most people are used to hearing your voice, but at least a voice that's different on the podcast. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Past week has been a little rough mentally. But today I'm surviving, getting a few things done on Monday, being a little productive. That's good. I'm preparing to move 2 states over for grad school. So had a lot of just kind of loose ends to tidy up and things like that. But yeah, I'm hanging in there.
Now, what is your official major going to be in grad school?
Sure. So I will be getting a master's in sport management.
Okay.
That's the official title. There's no there are very few esports specific programs, right? But a lot of my coursework is still going to be most of the applications or things that I will be doing. I will obviously be thinking about them in an esports context rather than a sports context in most cases. It's more of a sport administration sort of a thing, right? And it's less of the actual sports that go along with it. So getting to learn kind of the back end, some of the business components that go into things, and especially some of the groundwork that's already laid in to the sport industry is something that I'm really excited about to kind of learn a little bit more about and see where the parallels are with kind of my experiences within the esports industry, and hopes to eventually convert that into having a job at some point.
You know, my undergrad degree is sport management, and at the time, it was such an easy degree to get. It was basically a sports degree, except instead of talking about how Coca-Cola does things, you talk about how the Dallas Cowboys do things. But they also sprinkled in a lot of parks and recreation stuff, YMCA stuff, nonprofit recreation organization stuff. But never did, during my time in college, did the word esport come out of any of my professors' mouths. So yeah, it makes sense that sport management is the pseudo kind of esport degree now, but that just shows how much it's changed over the course of just the past 5 or 7 years or so, how quickly esports has kind of evolved.
Yeah, for sure. And I know there are pushes at other universities, especially at the undergraduate level, to start getting more undergraduate coursework in. Potentially even looking towards programs. I think there's a university in Canada, I believe it's St. Clair, that actually has their own bachelor's in esports management. So it's popping up at a few schools that are trying to start to do those sorts of things. And I imagine that, as the field continues to grow at large, you're going to start seeing a lot more of that as well.
And I would just imagine that was going to take, because again, this is changing rapidly. I mean, I'm only 10 years older than you, but the world you grew up in esport wise is completely different from what I had. So it's who knows where we're going to be 10 years from now. It's exciting to see.
To give you context there. So obviously as an undergraduate, I was heavily involved in my esports club, right? Being the president for my final 2 years. In my senior year, I was getting people entering the club, seeking out the club, saying that they had participated in their high school esports club and they wanted to be involved at the collegiate level. When I was in high school, 5 years ago, mind you, that was not a thing. You are not doing high school esports at all. But now you have people that have been doing high school esports that were involved in their clubs in a variety of fashions, whether it be broadcast people, whether that be some level of social media, whether they be players themselves, right? You have all of these people that now, I don't have to start trading people again. They're already coming in with some level of experience after doing it at the high school level, as opposed to just training everyone from scratch again, because they just didn't have that experience. So, yeah, and that was 4 years ago. That just shows you how quickly things are evolving and how quickly things are changing in the grand scheme of esports, whether it be at the scholastic or collegiate level.
Yeah, it's as somebody who grew up playing video games, and just the idea of playing with friends online just seems like an incredible thing. Just where everything's just kind of moving esport wise is exciting to see from my perspective. Yeah. I do have to offer my congratulations to you though. You have done the appropriate way to retire in the Splatoon scene, which is you step away for 2 days and then you're right back wherever you left off. So congratulations on your official Splatoon retirement.
I told everybody in the thread that it was not going to be an actual retirement, okay? Everyone knows that I'm probably too passionate and probably too full of myself to actually retire. But case in point, I'm not doing LANs anymore, okay? That's the main thing. LANs are not going to be my domain until some other opportunity comes up in like 2 years that someone asked me to do. But regardless, at least for now, LANs are no longer my domain. That's going to be handled by a group of folks that I've been training up, and I have full confidence that they'll be able to do the job.
But after Low Tide City, it seems like you've been kind of revitalized in the Splatoon scene as a whole. You've been doing a lot more commentary gigs. You've been tweeting out a lot more about topics like we're going to be talking about today that you didn't seem to be doing beforehand. Is it fair to say that, and I know you and I have talked leading up to Low Tide City, that was a lot more of like Raze and Siren and Risen and Kraken that were kind of handling the logistics leading up to it. But is it fair to say, like, after Low Tide City or during it, you kind of got a revitalization for the love of the competitive Splatoon scene?
I don't know that it was at Low Tide that I got that. I mean, I think, so in fairness, while we were trying to do prep work for Low Tide, was also me trying to decide whether or not I wanted to go to grad school, right? So like I had a lot going on in my head and a lot of moving parts. I also had to graduate. I was doing like 4 trips in 4 weeks in April, right? There was just a lot on my plate at that point. And it was at the point where it's like, okay, any Splatoon time that I have is going to get dedicated towards tracking out on Low Tide, and I have very little, right? Because I'd rather rest my brain, right? Rather than continue to keep on going and going. Admittedly, this summer, when I have a little less going on, right? I've started to have a little bit more time to do things. And that's the other thing too, is that commentary I have always viewed as much more of a hobby than, or in the past like 3 or 4 years. I've viewed my commentary as much more of a hobby and something that I genuinely enjoy, much more than hosting tournaments myself. The commentary, like, let's not kid ourselves. I probably could if I really wanted to, but I'm not going to put in the effort to like go pro anytime soon, right? The commentary is something I do for fun. It's something that, I get to put on a little bit of a performer hat and have a good time with, right? So I think, those kinds of outlets have given me something a little bit more to do. Also, Rissa asked me to cast like 2 or 3 things within a week. And so I was like, yeah, sure. What the heck? We'll do it. So I think most of the revitalization, actually, if you had to pinpoint where that would be, me caring a little more, it probably would be watching the World Championship, the high-level Japanese World Championship that happened with Starburst and Alliance Rogue getting invited. It was fun to watch. It was fun to kind of be a part of that group. and kind of watch that happen. So, it really didn't happen until last week, right? Where I was like, okay, cool, let's actually get back into this a little bit. So yeah.
Okay, well, hold that thought, because we'll probably go back to that Splat World Championships, because I do want to talk about, I guess, just like the state of high level in general at some point.
Sure.
But it's kind of sticking with Low Tide City. I guess I haven't really asked you this in a public way before, but how did it go from your perspective?
I think the event went well. I think there's not much to say, I think, about it. The event happened. It ran pretty well. There were a handful of hiccups here or there, and frankly, probably things that I made too big of a deal out in the moment, right? Because I didn't have that much else to focus on. But otherwise, I think the event went well. To me, it sounded like everybody had a good time. And in fairness, I like to say internally often that it almost doesn't matter how we run a LAN. People are going to have a good time regardless. Just because it's a LAN, right? People are seeing each other. It's a social experience more than it is anything that's actually like a competitively minded or competitively grounded event. Obviously, if FTW and Starburst show up and they meet in Grands, then like you start making a big deal out of it. But other than that, right, most people are going for the social experience of a LAN, less trying to win this Splatoon tournament, right? So it's something to the point where, like, as long as people are having a good time, and they almost always are having a good time, we're doing our jobs, right?
It helps when there's a fire pit for people to
It does help. The fire pit did help, yeah. The fire pit even helped me, I think, more than anything else. That was a nice way for me to kind of wind down for the day, right? And it was my social experience too, because I normally don't get to be social at these events, especially, I wasn't at Riptide, where I was kind of putting a little bit more pressure on myself to perform. Whereas at Low Tide, I was able to kind of take a little bit of a load off, have a little bit of a good time, and enjoy the company of folks. So appreciate you all that were there at the campfire. That was nice.
So now the next time you get to go to a LAN, hopefully it's just more of like a spectator kind of thing. Just kind of go and go through and enjoy it, which you have the opportunity to do so many times in the coming months. So I know you're not involved. Maybe you're like an advisor to some extent for some of these things, but we know you're not directly involved. You've officially passed the torch. But coming up in the end of August is Shine. A few months afterwards is Riptide, or a few weeks afterward is Riptide, and a month after that is Big House. And that's great. I'm excited for all three of those events. Not that I can make it to all three, but I'm excited that those things are all happening. My concern is, though, with all of those events suddenly popping up basically in a span of a month and a half right next to each other, is it too much too soon?
Yeah, so what I will say is that I have known that both Shine and Riptide were happening for probably about a year at this point, right? So when I was like, it was like, okay, Shine wants us, that's cool, let's try to find a way to make it work, right? And so that was the entire premise of me trying to train up a adequate number of staffers so that no staffer would have to work both events. That was my primary goal, because I've been sitting here going, I'm not even going to expect myself to lead up both of those events 2 weeks apart. I shouldn't expect anyone else to do that either, right? So when Big House came along, the Big House turnaround was extremely fast in terms of like me getting notified that was happening right up to announcement. But what am I going to do? Say no to the Big House? Like, in my head, when I'm sitting here, I was the first one to get contacted because I was kind of the point of contact for Low Tide. I was like, well, we should find a way to make this work, right? Especially given the kind of history that the Big House has with Splatoon, to some extent there, right, as well. It's difficult for me to justify an event saying, hey, we want Splatoon, and me going, you shouldn't host Splatoon, right? But I do think that, to your point, and a lot of people have been vocal, I think there are going to be some events that need to be repositioned in people's heads, right? We can't kid ourselves and say that every Smash tournament that Splatoon attends is going to be a major, right? I think there's going to be more events that want Splatoon to run alongside them. And I think there's like perhaps, and I don't know this for sure, right? I have no way of knowing this. But perhaps there's a chance that Splatoon is at a LAN once a month, right? Or like 6 times a year. Not every single one of those is going to be a major, quote unquote, right? And some of those events indeed might need to be regionals. It is just going to kind of depend on the year. It's going to depend on what people are most interested in. You know, I think Riptide's going to probably take a bit of a hit this year just because it's being weird right on release weekend. But in future years, I think Riptide's going to do very well, right? Because it's Riptide, it's at a Kalahari, it's a vacation spot, everyone loves it, right? So I think, you know, from an organizer's perspective, it's hard to tell other organizers, no, you shouldn't run Splatoon, right? Especially as we're starting to get noticed and picked up more. Now, admittedly, it stinks that they're all in the northeastern quadrant of the United States. It stinks that they're all a month and a half apart from one another, right? But by the same token, it's not like it's under our control, right? We're the ones that are getting approached by these Smash Brothers organizers that are like, hey, we think this is cool. We want to like support the scene and support the community. And it's not like I'm going around like playing or putting certain Smash majors in my shopping cart, right? So, you know, I think all of those things are kind of important in considering this. And look, I'm not going to all 3. If someone goes to all 3, they're probably absurd, right? I think we're starting to the point where it's time to not go to every LAN. That's okay, right? It's bound to happen. I know that people really enjoy LANs. I know you're really passionate about them, but it's okay to miss out on 1 or 2, right? So just, you know, keep that in mind. Things are going to start changing a little bit, I think. And who knows, things might pop up even more once Splatoon 3 picks up, right? So just worth noting.
Well, one thing you said it earlier today, and you brought this point up a lot during Low Tide City, was for you, the success of the event is if people were able to socialize and have fun during the event. Yep. My question, though, is the Smash TOs that are interested in bringing these events to their already established Smash events, what do they need to see something specific from the Splatoon side that makes them realize, okay, this was a worthwhile investment? Because it's like if only a certain number of people go to Shine because they're going to dodge it so that they can go to Riptide or that they can afford to go to the big house, does that like deter them maybe from wanting to bring it up again next year, or like deter possible other events like SmashCon or something from wanting to add Splatoon because they don't see it being successful at another LAN?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a possibility, right? In fact, that's one of the main reasons why perhaps, you know, Genesis didn't necessarily want us back, right?
Yes.
It's just inevitably going to happen that some events are going to be like, well, this isn't performing as well as we might have liked it to. This isn't performing up to our standards, and we're just going to cut it. I think it depends on the event. It depends on the organizer, right? There's no like one blanket statement that you can really say like, oh, this is just going to completely work. But yeah, I think it'll depend from organizer to organizer. I think if Splatoon, I mean, you know, let's not kid ourselves. Oftentimes it's going to come down to budget. If Splatoon breaks even on budget and the general consensus is, yeah, it was a good event, it was a well-run event, everyone had a good time, I don't think a Smash organizer is going to be like, you know, it's going to hate it, right? It's like, all right, cool, this worked, let's do it again, right? But to your point, you know, there is absolutely a chance where Shine doesn't perform as well and they don't want us back, or Big House doesn't perform as well and they don't want us back, or even Riptide just doesn't perform well and, you know, maybe they skip out on us for a year. There's absolutely always that chance. And it's one of the things about being in a small game that requires so many resources that, you know, it's something worth considering. And it's something that I think all of the organizers that are heading up those events are going to be considering, you know, how are we making each event unique so that the value proposition is there for attendees, right? Like I said, it still is a business, right? And obviously, I'm going to sit here and say maybe you shouldn't go to all 3 lands, but also the organizers would want you to come to each individual LAN, right? And they're all going to be vying for figuring out what exactly that's going to be. So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right in saying that there's a chance that things will change. There's no saying that we're going to be at Shine 2023 or Big House 11, right? There's no guarantee in that. It all is going to be on a year-to-year rotating basis. But I do imagine that given Splatoon's current trajectory and given the fact that we're about to head into 3 where there's probably going to be a significant bump in people that are interested, I think you'll start to get there soon as well. And I think it will turn some heads.
Yeah, I that's why I feel like from my perspective, Big House is the one that's going to be where all the eyeballs are on. It won't technically be the first Splatoon 3 land, but it'll be the first Splatoon 3 land where everyone's not using Quad Junior. So we got, if that one's really successful, then it's exciting to see what the future is going to be like with that. But I just feel bad for Shine and to some extent Riptide, just because they got screwed over something that was completely out of their control with the release date of Splatoon 3. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Last question with this land stuff though, because a lot of people have brought up, now that more lands are popping up, a lot of people have brought up, well, when are we going to get a land in my hometown, or Nine wants a land in St. Louis? How, like, Beacon used to run a standalone thing, and I know you weren't involved with Beacon. I believe that was GSM that did that, but that's only correct. Like not legit, but like bigger standalone Splatoon land that I could think of that used to exist. How difficult is it to run an event that doesn't leech off of Smash Brothers?
It depends how much are you going to put into it, right? I think for me personally, I have not had the resources myself, and I have not wanted to commit the resources myself into making a standalone Splatoon event happen. I think that when you are your own event, you start to become more liable for things like your own venue. You have to put up the funds for that, and you have to set those boundaries, and you have to be the legal entity responsible if something were to happen, right? As one example, right? And that's not to say that I am under no jurisdiction by attaching myself to a Smash Brothers event, but it is to say that there's another set of processes and another group of people that can help if something were to come up, right? So I think trying to do something like rent out a Kalahari Convention Center, for example, probably is not going to happen for a standalone Splatoon event.
Well, you wouldn't even need something that big. You would.
Right. Right. I mean, I'm sure you could find a part of a room or something, right, that you could grab, right? I mean, it's not like you have to use the entire convention center space of, a Kalahari every time. But regardless, right, I think it absolutely can happen. In fact, I know that, some people have been looking into those things. I think that lands popping up is huge, especially when you're looking at things like what Magic's been doing in Philly, alongside I should really have the name of the place memorized, and I don't off the top of my head. Whatever Nerd Street's joint is, Localhost, that's the one. But there are other land centers like it that are popping up, right? And there are other, they might not necessarily have the direct capabilities of running a Switch LAN, right? Or that might not be something they're used to doing, but it's something where there's a bunch of chairs and a bunch of monitors already set up for you. So I think at bare minimum, and what GSM did at first was starting to host locals out of spaces like that. Start going to your local LAN centers, start trying to boot things up, start trying to get a community running and up off the ground, maybe on a monthly basis or so, right? And then if there's enough interest, maybe you can start holding a regional event where you're asking other people to come in from other states and hosting a little bit more of a tournament. And it can only grow from there, I think, especially with the positioning of Splatoon 3 being right there, right on the horizon, where you're going to get Nintendo pumping out a bunch of ads for this cool new game, right? So it's all things to think about. I would heavily encourage, if you know of a LAN center in your area, maybe start thinking about it a little bit, especially if you have a little bit of a TO background and you kind of know the ropes there. Also, if anyone's interested, I know AC wrote a guide on how to run your own local a few years ago. I have that bookmarked. I'm more than happy to pass it along. So y'all probably know where to reach out to me to find that. But, I'm not going to go on a world tour anytime soon to do a bunch of locals, right? Everyone individually has to pick up that. So if you want things to happen in your area, you're the best candidate for it. Go do it.
See what you can do. Since you're retired now, you can become a consultant and get paid to go and set up these things across the cosmos here.
I am not getting paid to go run Splatoon local. Okay, I don't think that's going to happen.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to the Kbot, graduate from the Ohio State University, and
that's
one
right.
of the a member of +1, which means probably on the 50% side that doesn't vote in anything ever in that server.
Well, hang on. In my
vote?
defense,
You vote?
I do not vote.
Okay.
And the reason I don't vote is because I actually, what am I going to do? Judge player skill levels when I'm not actually playing against them?
You're saying that's what everyone else does? How would that be any different?
I don't play against them. I don't play against them at all. I don't play against them in scrims. I'm not in scrims. I don't do anything, right?
No, see, so you look over the 200 so people or whatever, and you just read the little comments people put on them, and then you vote. It only takes a couple of hours a month. Right. It's not that Low Tide City. One more thing. This is the nice transition question. So Low Tide City's map pool, I loved it personally. It's probably the smallest map pool I've ever seen from a non-gimmick tournament. There was 5 Splat Zone maps, 5 TC, 4 for Rainmaker, 4 for Clan Blitz. So 18 maps total, which is I like that. And nobody really complained about it, or if they did it on their private accounts where nobody could actually see it. But it just kind of sparks this new conversation, or I guess this new realization people have had is like, well, wait a minute. All the maps we use for competitive support this meta that we all hate. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I mean, there's a chance. You're asking the wrong person here. I'm just the one that hops on the mic and shouts really loud. I don't do a lot of analyzing. But no, I mean, there's absolutely a chance, right? That, to some people's credit, yeah, it might be true that the majority of people enjoy shooters. And so the majority of people enjoy selecting shooters and shooter maps that favor those kinds of weapons. And so in the, perhaps example that most people saw, maybe something like Mori Towers isn't selected as often. I think that's a fair argument. Now, are you going to get people to change from what they're currently doing? No, right? And one of the things that I'm going to talk about here, probably a little bit more in a bit, is, okay, what's my job as a tournament organizer, right? I think in an ideal world, my job as a tournament organizer is to take in the feedback of as many people as possible and think about as many different things as possible and consider what the best possible solution is, right? Or the best possible solution that satisfies or leaves the most number of people content as possible. And so if the most number of people being content is, here are the 20 maps that are shooter favored, then maybe that's the case, right? Maybe that's the best option, what I should do, right? Because if it's going to leave most people content or most people satisfied, then they'll be more likely to return to my tournament, right? So something to consider, right? Yeah, sure, there's absolutely the chance. And I will say, I will take no credit for the map pool. That was mostly Ray's. And I imagine Siren probably took a look over it. Rissa probably took a look over it as well. Kraken might have.
Well, yeah, for Low Tide City. But I remember when the initial push came from Dude, when Dude released that video and was like, wait a minute, why are we playing every single map and mode? That makes no sense. And I remember you set up maybe the first legit kind of survey of like, hey, what map should we start limiting or like doing more often? Do you think the just starting to limiting the map pool in general was a good idea? Because I personally think it is. If you're spending more time practicing just the certain maps and less time practicing bad maps, doesn't that make everybody better?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I think if there's a general consensus that certain maps are bad and should generally not be played or are more prone to being less balanced and more cheesy, then, and they don't want to play those maps, then why should we waste our time, right? To your point of finding the resources to play on those kinds of maps, right? Could it have altered the growth and the, how do I want to word this? Uniqueness, maybe? Or creativity. That's what I want to say. Would it have altered the creativity that we would have seen in future compositions from future players? Perhaps, right? We won't know unless you have some alternate parallel universe hopping device, right? Where you can go back and be like, all right, what happens if they don't do that? But, you know, I think there's absolutely a chance that could have happened. Do I think it was good or bad? I mean, it was probably good, right? It makes a lot of things a lot easier. You know, it's like now I look at anything like a Kelp Dome or a Moray Towers, if it were to come up on my commentary block, and I go, I don't know when the last time I had to commentate a serious match over this map was, right? It's like, yeah. So in short, it probably is a good thing so that now we can focus on other things and not just have to pack our brains full of knowledge of each individual map. But I think, you know, people are going to have different opinions. And that's the other thing, is that you will never get a unanimous approval rating. Okay, that doesn't happen, right? Once you reach above like 10 people in a room, you're never going to get a unanimous, like, yes, this is the best option, do this 100% of the time, right? So people are going to have differing opinions, and I think that's healthy, as a matter of fact, right? So, yeah, I mean, shrug. It was probably a good thing that we limited the number of maps, but you're allowed to say that it isn't a good thing, and you're allowed to say... Now, the other thing I will say, when Splatoon 3 comes out, because here's the other thing, by the way, about this whole map pool argument. I find it kind of silly that you want to try to blow things up 3 months before the new game release. Because in 3 months, everything's going to become pointless anyway.
Yes.
We have no clue. We know what, like 2 maps that are in this new game, 3 maps that are in this new game.
We know what the Tri-Slosher looks like. That's what
we know what the weapons look like, or we're starting to get a better idea of some of those things. But like, other than that, we don't even know what rank modes are going to be in the game on launch. So we don't even, I imagine there's going to be like 10 maps in the game, probably on release. Like a release day tournament that happens is going to feature all of those maps, right? And we're just going to have to figure things out again. What works with this meta? I think Arawata Mall, for example, was an okay map in Splatoon 1. It wasn't the best. Walleye Warehouse was an okay map in Splatoon 1, at least compared to other alternatives. And in Splatoon 2, both those maps are complete and utter garbage, right? For example, or are generally accepted to be complete and utter garbage, I suppose I should say. So, you know, there's always a chance that things are going to change heading into the new game. So I find that having the argument of maybe we should play more maps is kind of silly when we're 3 months out from release. But hey, that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, when Splatoon 3 comes out, you can't make a map pool because you don't know. You don't know how things, right. You know, like Arawata Mall works in Splatoon 1 because the map's a little bit different, but also quick respawn is a lot different. Special spam, you can't special spam in Splatoon 1. And then when you look at like the maps that came over from Splatoon 1 to Splatoon 2, the only Splatoon 1 maps we play competitively is Anchovy. I think everything else is not touched at all. And that's just kind of a sense of like Nintendo getting better at making maps in general. But yeah, to your point, And not just maps, but I mean the meta. As much as people hate the meta, that's going to change in 3 months as well. That's 100% going to change, and it's going to change constantly over the coming months after it gets released, as we figure out the game, as patches come out. So yeah, a lot of the issues people bring up, it's like, yeah, that's going to be solved on September the 9th.
Just hold on to it for 3 more months. All right, it's not going to be solved. It'll be a new process of trying to figure things out.
It won't be solved, but it'll be helped a lot.
Right. And the other thing, too, by the way, is when we're thinking about when we introduced the idea of these reduced map pools, we didn't instantaneously say, all right, these are the 20 good maps, and if you don't play these 20 maps, you're kind of throwing when you're making a map pool, right? Over time, these map pools started to converge on whatever the widely accepted opinion was. And so if you compare 2 individual map pools from a tournament from 2019 or whenever we started doing that, you probably would notice that those 2 individual map pools might have shared some similarities, but also looked pretty different. As opposed to, I imagine now, if you're contrasting 2 different map pools, you would see a lot of the same maps, right? As these opinions started to converge. So I would encourage that process to start again from all tournament organizers. When this new game comes out, and we'll start including all 10 maps on release, and then a new map will get it added, and then it'll be like, okay, you know, does this one fit? We have to like play it a little bit. We have to figure that out, and it can only get tested in a competitive setting, right? So by all means, I think all of that is going to happen, and it's going to happen again. It's not like we're just going to limit ourselves to only play 4 maps on release and then call it a day, right? If we do, then I don't know what we're doing or what we're thinking.
You failed at passing the torch. That's what
right.
That's come to the case. Epic Pikachu, to your point, kind of talking about the resurgence of Chargers that's been going on a low level. Yes, a team that won LSL is using Charger. A team that won Low Inc. uses Charger, and a bunch of other Alpha Bracket teams have been using Charger as of late. Which proves you can be successful with it. My counter argument to that is the team that won Low Inc. 2 months ago ran the anti-Charger comp and forced the best Charger team to bench their Charger player and bring in another shooter so that they could match squad shooter with quad shooter. So I think low level is just being nice with each other and not running the anti-Charger comp as often as they probably should have. But that's, again, I digress. There are some top-level Charger players, as Magic kind of pointed out, but there's not any top-level teams, and that's something a lot of people have been bringing up. There's Starburst, there's FT Win, Alliance Rogue, and some other teams we could mention here, but there's not a lot of opportunities for them to play against each other, so we don't really get to see them in action that much, and Starburst seems to be pretty much FT Win now anyways, when you look at the people who are playing on both of those teams. You kind of mentioned you were paying attention to the Splat World Championships. Both of the commentators, the English commentators, are in chat right now. How much did you look into the World Championships, and how were you kind of surprised that Starburst was able to make it to semifinals?
I don't know that surprised is the right word that I would say it might have been unlikely, and maybe that was me being skeptical, right? But I certainly wasn't going into this saying they're a shoo-in for semis, at least, right? Just because, I mean, personally, I don't follow the Japanese scene probably nearly as much as I should. I probably said this on the Popcast like the first time I was on. But not knowing how these teams got here, who these players are, how good they are, I was like, okay, maybe there's a chance Starburst moves on. Maybe there's a chance Alliance Rogue moves on. But of course, I wasn't actively paying attention to. I was even actively paying attention to Starburst and Alliance Rogue before, the World Championship happened. So I didn't even know where they kind of stood in terms of their skill. So it wasn't particularly surprising to see them take a set. It was good to see. Don't get me wrong. And it was good to see them be competitive in that semifinal set as well. Just I think all of the players, you could tell by their reactions afterward, they were like, man, just a few spur of the moment decisions, and we probably would have had one of those games, to kind of change the direction of the set. But yeah, I think it was good overall. It was a good showing, especially for Starburst. And the next question is going to be, well, how can we get more teams to that level? And I'm sure we're going to dive into that here.
Well, go ahead and answer that. How do we get more teams to that level? And let me say this. I shouldn't be surprised that Starburst did well, because in that kind of format, it was best of 3 single elimination up to grand finals.
Yeah.
That's
I think it was best of 3s for quarters, and I think it was best of 5 for semis.
That's a good format for Starburst, because as I've kind of looked back over some of the sets Starburst has played it, I noticed kind of a trend, and I don't know if you were here for the pre-show and listened to the stat I read out, but I'll read it out again because I think it's kind of interesting. So Starburst versus Kings. Now, Kings isn't like purely all from Japan, and they have different rosters every time. But when they played against each other, those two teams, in 20XX and Super Jump, the last 2 majors, when those 2 teams play in winners semifinals, their per game record against each other is 5 apiece. They're tied at 5-5. They're right with each other. Starburst winning game 5 in Super Jump, Kings winning game 5 in 20XX. When those 2 teams have played in grand finals of those 2 tournaments, it's not even close. Kings have won 11 games. Starburst has won 2. They can't even. That suggests 2 teams that are not even in the same div, even though a few rounds earlier they're right with each other. So it's like not having enough high level teams, but the high level teams we have don't. The issue isn't that they're not counterpicking Moray Towers. The issue is that they're running out of gas. They're not being challenged enough in other tournaments outside of these majors to where they have to actually care and like mentally get through a tournament, so that when they finally get in a situation against the team they can beat in the Kings, they just mentally can't compete with that other team anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough in Splatoon, it's not talked about enough, I think, in general in esports, is the mental aspect. I guarantee you, now, forgive me for not being able to pinpoint the exact spot. It was like game 2 of that semifinal set, right? Where like Ice was trying to pick up the Rainmaker or something, couldn't quite do it, or like turned around at the wrong time and then got, someone else came up from behind or whatever the case is, right? You can pinpoint the moment where like Starburst had the clear opportunity to go ahead, take the game, equalize the set, and they just didn't. They couldn't find it. And I genuinely think that you look back at that moment and you go, from that point on, Starburst doesn't play the same. And that happens in every set. That happens in every tournament. And you can't just sit there and go, oh, yeah, well, that's the one moment, right? But anytime that something like that happens, it's going to stick with you, right? If you're a competitive player, you're going to be like, well, crap, that was our one chance and we blew it. Are you going to play the same after thinking that you're kind of out of it already? No, you're not, right? In the example of 20XX, Starburst enters the grand final set going, well, crap, we couldn't beat these guys first series of 5. We can try it again. Like, let's do it. But maybe our track record doesn't quite show the same, or they're feeling slightly shaky, or look at a grand finals and then a bracket reset happens. It's like, well, crap, we couldn't stop them then. They have the momentum all on their side now. They're going full steam ahead. And I think that's incredibly important, and something that we don't convey enough is that mentality and is that momentum. And to your point, a lot of it is because these players don't get challenged after, or they get challenged finally after a 4-hour-long tournament versus the grand finals team. They don't necessarily feel that challenge all the way through. And there's not really a solution for that, right? It's like, all right, who's going to be the next team to challenge them? Can we get them entering in more tournaments together? And can we get them kind of understanding their mental game as well? Because come on, we're still talking about high school and college students here, right?
Yeah.
Which further exaggerates the issue. It's okay to get emotional about your gameplay, right? But that's the thing, is that you're not going to be as emotionally mature to just be able to just take that, set that aside, set any doubt aside. New game never works, right? So I think that's something that our top players are going to get more used to. I think it might be something that the Japanese players are more accustomed to doing, or they're more accustomed to not, maybe they're more accustomed to not feeling as much of that kind of emotional stake. But, you know, perhaps that's true. Who knows?
Is it now, we're not going to get new teams between now and Splatoon 3. Making a new team right now doesn't seem very logical, considering you don't even know if you make a new team right now and then Splatoon 3 comes out and your anchor player all of a sudden wants to be a support player, and that doesn't fit your ideology. You're just going to it's not going to work. But
Ink Armor isn't going to be in the new game.
That's true. But
what's your armor player going to do now?
Yeah, but the vacuum is broken. I don't know if you've seen the videos. Obviously, vacuum is so special it can't be beaten. But to my point, like when we get more, if more teams start forming after Splatoon 3, yeah, they're going to play in some tournaments initially. But it's like, are there not enough tournaments that enticed high-level teams to stick around right now? And a point I can bring up is I've had Shaq on the Popcast, and I've talked to Shaq. I said to Shaq, a high-level tournament is a tournament that's got like a $200-300+ prize pool. That's like the only reason a high-level team would come out for it, right? And he said, no, we'll come out for a tournament with no prize pool if the stream and production value of that tournament is really good. But and we're starting to see, honestly, Squid Junction had some high-level players playing it recently. Squid Boards would bring out some higher-level players as well. But is it just a case of there's not enough opportunities for high-level players to play in tournaments, or they just look at the ones that they already have and they're just not interested in them?
All right, here we go. Strap in, folks. Here's my hypothesis. My hypothesis, which I believe to be true, is that high-level players are actually, this isn't true just for high-level players. This is true for any team that is actively looking at whether or not they want to play in a tournament. Now, there's a bit of an asterisk there, but it should be true for pretty much every team. You're not going to play in the tournament unless you believe that there is a competitive skill level for your team, right? So the example of this is low ink. For low ink, any low-level team that has played in a low ink before knows that they are going to have a competitive experience playing in that tournament, even if they're coming in as the favorites. And one of the reasons for that is because there's a normal distribution of teams, right? If you're thinking about the normal distribution of teams, the normal distribution of players, skill level overall, there's going to be a slice of that distribution that is more dense than the higher level of teams. And so regardless, if you play in a low-level tournament, you're probably going to be pretty competitive in that low-level tournament. When you're looking at it from the high-level perspective, and when you're looking at it from the FTW or Starburst perspective, there are 2-3 other teams that can give you a run for your money at a high level. So if you're looking at signing up for a tournament and you are a Starburst, if FTW is not playing and there is not any money on the line, then what is your incentive to play? I can't find one. I don't know if anyone has one. But I would doubt, like, they're not trying to play in a tournament to get themselves known more because they already are known, right? So to that point, the only thing that's going to attract another high-level team to play is another high-level team. And when you have 0 high-level teams sign up for your tournament, you are not suddenly going to get +1 high-level team to sign up for the tournament, right? Because if everyone looks at the participants and there's not an FTW or not a Starburst listed, you're not going to see anybody there. Now, How do you change that? The simplest solution is to make it worth their while and throw a prize pool at it, which will in turn attract at least one team to show up. And then in turn will attract a second team to show up. And then things start to keep on going forward, right? If all of a sudden Jackpot enters a $100 tournament, Starburst goes, oh, we can beat those guys. Let's sign up. Easy as that. Now there's an incentive that got someone there first. And now you don't have another layer on top of that, right? Now, let's take this on the flip side. From my perspective as a tournament organizer, what incentive do I have to run a high-level tournament? If I don't know who the teams are going to be outside of like 4, if I have to cough up some money for the tournament to try to get those teams invited or get those teams to sign up in the first place, if I have to spend my weekend hosting an online open major that I'm not getting paid for, right? Where's my incentive? Especially if only one high-level team is going to show up and play. There's not much of an incentive there for me to just randomly host a high-level tournament and cater to every single thing that every high-level player or every +1 player says. There just isn't. There's much more of an incentive. There's more of an incentive and the reason why you all have been doing low ink for 2.5 years or however bloody long it's been is because there's an incentive, because there was always a community that is passionate and driven for that event. There was always an incentive for Sendo to host in the zone because there was always a community and group of people that were passionate and really wanted to see that event happen and really wanted to play in that event. If I'm coming out on the woodwork with a random high-level tournament, there's not as much incentive for people to play unless there's a prize. Or unless there's been a drought of majors for the past who knows how long, because 20XX filled that void, right?
Yes.
So you sit here and you look at this and you go, now, whose fault is it? Is it the player's fault for not registering, or is it the TO's fault for not making players register?
Well, let me bring up this point, and because a lot of people have been referencing BNS consistently a lot. Whenever there's some sort of topic about high-level stuff, oh, well, BNS was the Glory Day stuff. And there were TOs that were running those kind of weekly events that did have prize pools and streams that were interesting, to say the least.
Jordan was a masochist, so I don't know that BNS counts.
But those were TOs that were creating the stuff that people want. And what happened to those guys? They gave a middle finger to everyone and left because they got tired of putting up with all of the nonsense that kind of came from high-level players.
Precisely.
And I've been vocal about this, talking about TO abuse, and I to be fair, I did look back at the feedback of 20XX, and I was talking about how it's good that there was positive feedback, like not just like pat on the back, great job, but like, hey, here's some things I think you did wrong, but I still love the tournament and I would like to see these things kind of improve. Like, it was positive feedback that helps everything grow, but it's also kind of absurd that I have to be like, good for you guys for playing nice. You know, like, as you say, what's the incentive for a TO to make a high level event? It's like, most people just don't want to because of having to deal with the extra unwarranted attention that gets sent upon them for no reason. Negative attention.
Yeah, exactly. If a high level tournament shows up and they have a less than stellar production value, everyone's just going to crap on the production all of a sudden, and that's going to demotivate any tournament organizer to actually care, right? So like, and that's the other thing too, and one of the things especially about like the names and branding and things like that, as a tournament organizer, I'm trying to take the tournament seriously, and I'm trying to provide an avenue for the players to show themselves off. if the players aren't going to take themselves seriously, how does that make me feel? Right?
Well,
Like if you're not going to take yourself seriously, I'm the one that's already putting my weekend on the line. If you're not going to take yourself seriously, then why should I start taking myself seriously? Like, why should I keep taking myself seriously? Right? Which is exactly what Ink TV did, by the way. They were just like, all right, whatever. Two can play at that game.
The
right?
no TO tournament.
The no TO tournaments, the whole thing, the whole shebang, even going back to BNS and going back to the commentators, right?
Yeah.
If you all aren't going to take this seriously, why should we take this seriously? Right?
Right.
Like, come on. Also, other note, by the way, as well, in terms of prize pools, that BNS prize pool was generated by probably 90%, probably by about 6 people in the Ink TV Twitch chat.
Yes.
It was never crowdfunded by a bunch of people chipping in $5. It was hardly ever crowdfunded by any of the players, and maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but especially none of the high-level players were chipping into that, right? So that's all Twitch chatters enjoying the production, enjoying the show, trying to chip in to keep the tournament running. That is not necessarily players putting their own money on the line to do that, which I think is also something that's interesting and worth noting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a good point to bring up. And I don't think that's something that a lot of people kind of say, because a lot of people do suggest, well, just run a donation during your thing and it's going to get a lot of money. Well, yeah, you saw a lot of that money coming in, but that was just like a handful of people donating larger stuff, to your point, just wanting to support the tournament. It's not the community reinvesting in itself it's not like little Timmy that's chipping in their lunch money and everybody's combining to do that like it's some sort of booyah bomb we're all contributing to. It's not that. It never was that.
The donations almost always come from the Twitch stream and not necessarily from like some Twitter drive that's happening before the event. Now, perhaps there are exceptions to be made in terms of charity cases or things like that, right? But by and large, the majority of your tournament donations, when you're running a tourney, your own donor prize pool, is coming in from the Twitch chatters. It's coming from the people that are watching the tournament, the people that are spectating and enjoying that value and want to give back to the teams and somewhat by proxy, the organizers themselves, right? So, and look, and forgive me again, but I have watched numerous pay-to-play tournaments get half as many teams as they would have gotten if they were free. I've watched that with my own eyes because people don't want to put up the money for it. Even if it's like $2 a person. People just don't want to put it up. Because they're afraid they're going to lose it to Starburst or FT-Win or someone else sweeping in and taking over. So, and in fairness, can you blame them? No, you can't blame them.
That's what's going to happen.
Especially because that's what's going to happen, especially when there are a bunch of free tournaments and I could play. There were 4 tournaments happening last Saturday at the same time. I could play in any of those. If one of them was pay to play and I didn't want to pay, I would just play in a different one. There's plenty, right?
To fix the scene, every tournament must be pay to play. No more free tournaments. Got it.
And that's not
going
to
have this conversation. Hey, you talked about last tech. This is a really great chat we're having here, but it's eating up a lot of time.
Yeah,
last
apologies
question.
for that. I tend to ramble.
You do, and I want you to ramble. Rambling is good. It makes my job a lot easier here. You talk about players taking themselves seriously. How is it important for people to have consistent IGNs in every tournament that they play in?
Look, so is it important? I think it depends on the context. It makes my life as a tournament organizer easier. Okay. Like, do you want me? It probably makes your life easier too when you're registering. Do you really want me to have everybody submit their friend codes so that I know for sure who's playing in the tournament? Would you like that as a team captain? on Battlefy for there to be a box where you have to submit every individual player's friend code when you sign up.
That'll cut your registration in half, because getting that information from your teammates is pulling teeth sometimes.
Precisely. So just match your name to what's like. Everyone can enter their own name. I have signed up for Battlefy tournaments before. I know that you can just type in whatever you want in that box. If you really want to type in something random, then fine, type in something random. But I think the part where it becomes more important is in terms of player branding. And this is one of the things that a low-ink team is doing infinitely better than a mid-level team. There are numerous examples of that. One of the reasons why I think mid-level is so rough right now, in addition to not having things differentiated, and this is true even for high level, is like, okay, let me give you the example actually for high level, since I tend to work mostly in the high level scene. For the past 3 weeks, before SWC, before 20XX, if someone was to ask me, what are the high level teams in the game right now? I would respond with FTW, Starburst, and that's it. I wasn't paying as close enough attention to know that Alliance Rogue was coming. I wasn't paying close enough attention to know that Rift had returned. As far as I was concerned, Starburst and FTW were still the only two. I would not have known that Jackpot still existed. I would not have known that Harrich Hinterlander was starting to take sets. I would not have known that the Root was starting to come up and it was kind of like the next generation of French players, right? I would not have known any of that before 20XX. Why don't I know any of that? Again, goes back to the argument earlier. Is it the TO's fault for not hosting tournaments to play in? Or is it the player's fault for not differentiating themselves and for not giving TOs a reason to host tournaments? If I believe that it's going to be close, that an FTW versus Jackpot series is going to be close, if I believe that to be true, then maybe I'll be more inclined to host a tournament. Or if I believe that FTW, Starburst, and Jackpot are all three really close teams, and you don't know who's going to come out on top, I would be more inclined to host a tournament. Now, how do I believe that if none of these players are actually playing in tournaments? I believe that because the players are hyping themselves up. Like, oh, cool, look at us. Like, we're doing really good. They're separating themselves, and I'm able to recognize their name, and I'm able to recognize the team names, and I'm able to recognize the player names because of their individual branding. Well, and so in that context, I think that is where you have a personal incentive as a player to sign up for every tournament with the same name, with a recognizable name that is yours. Build a Twitter profile, which is not that hard to do. It is not that hard to post clips on Twitter either. You don't need to be a master video editor to do a lot of the stuff, to just separate yourself. Why are you unique? Why are you special? Why should I care to watch you play the game? Well, teams like Woodley Phantoms were doing this at the low level because they were posting funny memes on Twitter. It doesn't have to be like, oh, look at us, we're so great. It can be, oh, look at us, we're so funny, we're so entertaining. It could be, oh, look at us, we have a unique style of playing the game. Where have we seen that? Limeade. There are so many different ways that you can position yourself as a player, as a brand, that it is beneficial for you to be more recognized in those sorts of contexts. And so actually, I believe that regardless of whether or not a TO has a rule that says you're supposed to do it, you as a player should do it, and it is in your best interest. I mean, isn't that the entire point of these things, is to get more clout in the scene, right? The only way to get more clout is not by entering a tournament with 420 Blazed as your username. It's doing it with your own name.
But, okay, so it's not just teams. Okay, so these players that you kind of listed off, Starburst, FT1, Jackpot, all those players, they're still playing in tournaments. They're just not playing with each other. They're playing in pickup. So and that's kind of sucked down to low level as well. We're starting to see a little bit more pickup start to come up through there. And again, that could just be a symptom of the game is in its final stages, and we're waiting for Splatoon 3 to come out or whatever. But it's also, So like all those players are still playing, but it's also confusing. You talk about branding. You think of a team like FT Win, and you know this. If they have one sub, all of a sudden it's not FT Win, or what they've been doing recently is just changing their name altogether, and they're just like Back Pink or something. It's like, no, you are FT Win, but they value that brand so much to they know if they don't feel confident that they can win their tournament straight up, then, well, you didn't beat FT Win. We were Bonsai Bill or whatever this week.
Right. Now, absolutely correct. However, I do think there is a very strong merit to saying you did not beat the 4 members of our team, so therefore you did not beat our team. We're talking about how a player's mental can change. How about changing one of the puzzle pieces in the 4 players that are playing in the game, right? Like that will have a drastic impact on how the team plays the game. Regardless, or maybe not drastic, but noticeable impact on how the team plays the game. So I think it is fair to not enter every, like if you don't have your main 4 or your main 5 players on the roster, it's fair to say, all right, we're not entering this tournament as our normal team name. However, I think if you have the 3 or 4 members, you can have some other team name that is recognizable. Example, not FTW, right? It's not them, but you know it's mostly the same players, right? There are so many examples of different variations on a team name that you could do that is not just some random pickup name, right? That is also where branding comes into play. But regardless of any of that, I don't think you necessarily need a team brand to carry you, although it might help in addition. I think that you can brand yourselves as a personal player just the same. Oh, look at me, I'm so good. Or, oh, look at me, I one-trick this specific weapon, so if you want to see high-level clips of this weapon at play, follow me for that, right? I think that there are a lot of different ways to position yourself as a player in addition, independent of what your team status is.
Roundy, I think there's a lot of truth to that, honestly. Roundy decided saying if you change your IGN for a tournament, it's kind of a fail-safe. If you pop off and do good, you can take credit for it. If you don't, you can just kind of fly under the radar. It's like, oh, well, I was this week, so you don't recognize it as me. I think there is some truth to that. And I'm not sitting here trying to judge people. Like I tweeted out, for like a weekly tournament, I don't care. Like as a commentator, it's annoying, but as like as somebody who's just observing the tournament, I know who those players are, so I don't really care if people change their name or not. And to be fair, I think that's where most of the conversation comes from, is just every SOS. It's just like, it's, you know, you either watch every SOS and you know who's playing, or you're just tuning in as a casual and you're like, who the hell is Fred? Or whatever. Yeah. But I don't know. I just think it's more of an issue of just pickups in general, being the lack of teams. And like you said, with subs, if you have one sub, is that still the same team or not? And then do you kind of just change things and then it all goes off rails from there? But, you know, it's, again, let's have this conversation again in 3 months. Because
No. It's bound to happen again. It's bound to happen again because we've been here before. We've had this exact same discussion before hey, maybe the players should have the same names. Like, please, just because it makes our lives as TOs so much easier. And then the players go, no, I don't think I will. No, I mostly kid there. But, I mean, all these discussions are bound to happen again, along with a plethora more of what happens in Splatoon 3. Here's the other thing, too, by the way. In other games, you can't change your name without paying. Right? So suddenly it's a lot less of an issue. Especially, I mean, it was to some extent true for like NNIDs or something like that. That was a little bit more recognizable. That was something that was attached to your profile instead of just a string of 10 numbers or whatever. But in other esports, you cannot change your in-game name. You cannot just go on an alt. And like, I think the argument of, oh, it's an alt, or I just wanted to change my name for solo queue. Okay, fine, right? Is it that much effort to change it back? Or like, if you forget to change it back after the first set in the tournament, maybe change it back while you're waiting for your second set of the tournament, you know? It's just the small little things like that. That's like, okay. And again, once again, circles back to, if you're not taking the event seriously, why should I take the event seriously? And if I shouldn't take the event seriously, then why am I volunteering my time to continue running tournament? I don't know, right? So
I like the idea of an IGN tax that you just suggested right there. There we go. That's the
that's what it is.
It's $5 to
Every
go buy
time.
butt fart this week, baby. Unfortunately.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, let's wrap this up. Go. Everyone knows where you are, but still plug yourself a little bit here. What's the next Splatoon thing that you think you might be paying attention to?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know right now.
You were tweeting about Area Cup.
Something will happen. I tweeted about Area Cup yesterday. The reason I tweeted about Area Cup is because I happened to be awake because I was helping out with a different tournament that I was getting paid for. So I happened to be awake at that time. I was like, oh, cool. I can kind of put on Area Cup in the background and more people should be talking about things like this. But yeah, find me on Twitter, Kbot_273. You can see most of the stuff you're doing there. We were starting with this conversation a bit earlier, but hey, a lot of you are about to enter college. Go talk to your college esports club. Go, or all of you that are in high school where some of these things are popping up, go talk to your high school esports club too. And I encourage each of you to not just be committed to Splatoon in those sorts of contexts as well. The only reason why I have as much knowledge and experience that I do is because I open myself up to games like Rocket League, to games like League of Legends, Valorant I have some experience with, right? I'm starting to get familiar with all of these different games that are much more popular esports. And I think it'll help maybe you as players to think about things like that. It'll certainly help you as organizers and as production managers and things like that, even as commentators to listen to other games. So I do encourage you to get involved with your scholastic or collegiate clubs wherever you're going to school, whether or not they have Splatoon. Either start up the Splatoon stuff yourself or just start getting associated with them and start learning about other games, Smash Brothers, things like that. Obviously, I've loved it. It's one of the reasons why I'm kind of making the decisions that I'm making going to grad school now. I'll be at Illinois State. So if anyone wants to see what we're doing there, feel free to do that. Feel free to talk to me about anything in that regard. You all know where to find me. If I don't get to you right away, poke me again in another 2 weeks or so. But yeah, absolutely start getting engaged with not only Splatoon, but other games as well at your colleges and high schools. In addition to, go make locals happen and maybe call yourself by the name that you normally go by. But yeah, thanks Popgun for having me on. Sorry y'all had to listen to me ramble for over an hour, and have fun with the rest of the low level stuff.
Hey, thanks for coming on again. You are now tied with Magic and JPEG for third for most appearances on the show with number 3. When we're gonna get you number 4 at some point, right? You're gonna be the first to reach number 4.
Oh, I mean, almost assuredly, I'm not actually going to retire. So I'm sure I will still be around and still be somewhat relevant.
In my job, when people retire, they come back as part-time people. It's just like ghosts that never die. And it's like, no,
that's
I
right.
didn't like you and you retired, leave. But no, you're the ghost that keeps on giving. So thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you again for coming on.
Will do. Was a blast. Like I said, feel free to hit me up for anything. That's Popgun, Twitch chat, whatever. Y'all know where to find me. Take care, everyone. Have a good one.
Was Kbot, retired TO, and just all-around journeyman when it comes to things in competitive Splatoon. Really good conversation right there. Always is whenever we have Kbot on. And I like having people like that, not just Kbot, but a lot of other people that we've had on recently that have just been giving us good, solid things to talk about. It's not, this is all these things are just kind of open for conversation. And it's a lot easier to just come on and discuss these things in a recorded form than just 140 characters on Twitter with who knows who responding behind it. So, really good conversation there. I know this is going to be the longest episode I've ever done, but it's going to be worth it. We'll get through the weekly recap, but I got a little short thing I want to say about Infinity Cups that is kind of applicable to everyone here. So we're going to move later on to this. Also, 9, I saw you say something like you have a lot of opinions on something we say. Don't worry. You can just come on to the Popcast next week, and then you can share it all then in less than an hour. Usually these conversations usually last about 30 minutes, but when Kbot speaks, you just kind of shut up and let the dude say what he's got to say, because there's always some good stuff there. Moving on, though, it is now time, finally, for the weekly recap. SOS number 70 took place on Wednesday last week, with Rising Wave connecting their way through grand finals to win over Cook Islands. Hey, another pickup team that we're kind of talking about last time. It's kind of the issue. Rising Wave, though, not a pickup team, a actual legit team, survived 2 Game 5s, getting up to grand finals before, well, outlasting Cook Island based off of disconnect issues. A lot of DC issues on both sides. Just because players were all over the world in that set the more you look through it. But Rising Wave claiming their second SOS tournament there. Claudia's Angels finishing in 3rd place of that one. Hammerhead was won by Cherry Limeade. Mako Bracket was won by Koi. And the Lantern Bracket was won by Watercolor Junior by default. I think Stargaze, who I was excited to see come back, ultimately ended up dropping there from that tournament. Moving right along to Squid Junction number 24. This is kind of what we've been talking about. A lot of high-level players playing in a tournament but using different names. This one, the team winning this one, full of LGBTQIA+. That essentially, as I looked at it, was Doc Q, Johnny, Isabel, and Synops. So a very strong team in its own right. They beat Memory in grand finals. I believe swept them out of there. Bonsai Bill taking 3rd place. Bonsai Bill having 17 members on their roster, including Brochara, pretty much all of FD Win, past and present, Morbin Time, and Reef from Kappa, formerly of Kappa, a low ink player. Are we now going to ban Reef for getting 3rd place in Squid Junction with all those players? I don't know. I don't even want to think about that right now. But still, a lot of strong players playing in pickup team names. So be it. It was still interesting to see. I was like, is there a prize pool? Why are these guys playing in Squid Junction? Not that there's anything wrong with Squid Junction. We just haven't seen those kind of players play an event like this. Pretty interesting. Full of LGBTQIA+, with 14-1 in this tournament. Hey, who was the team that took 1 game off of those guys? It was Destiny Troops, baby. They didn't sweep Destiny Troops, but they swept everybody else. Full disclosure, I did not play in that tournament with Destiny Troops, even though I was on the roster. Got to give shout-outs to Tofu, Haya, Sir Skits, and Baki, who you probably don't even know who that is, but has been on our team for a long, long time. Attaboy, Destiny Troops, even though finished 7th overall. FNF season number 4, 5 nights at Falco's took place this week 1 took place this upcoming, last Friday I should say. It's called Friday Night Frenzy. We're getting a little off track as we're trying to look up the scores here on Twitter. A lot of 3-0s, a lot more 3-0s than what you were expecting. Aquatic Vanguard swept Acropora, Crimson Quake dealt with the Pirates of Shiver Me Inklings. Inked INKD got a 3-0 win over Jelly Squids. Jelly Squids a lot more competitive, though, than what a 3-0 would indicate. The highlight match of this one, though, New Horizons getting a 2-1 win over Ink Bashers. Ink Bashers announcing they're on hiatus, going up against New Horizons, a team made up of former Ocean 7 players, and a team I'm going to be rooting for going forward. A very fun set to see on that stream. just week one of that tournament. It's going to be exciting to see more FNF stuff going forward. And that was your weekly recap, sponsored by the brand new in-game name Tax. If you now sign up for Low Ink and you change your name, JPEG is going to send you a bill for $5 each time you change your name. All that money is going to be going towards the IPL Healthcare Fund, so that we can start giving out healthcare to all of our TOs and I can quit my IRL job. The IGN Tax, official sponsor of this week's episode of the Weekly Recap. Oh, okay. Infinity Cup. I like to do a tournament recap on every episode of the Popcast, if it makes sense to do that. Infinity Cup is the tournament you probably did not hear about until I just said the name of it right now. You might have saw some results and people talking about it on Twitter, but you might not have known what tournament they were talking about. One of the main issues in the scene is the oversaturation of low-level tournaments. I've been pretty vocal about this, how there's been a lot of low-level teams that will just kind of build up this brand new low-level tournaments. Like we don't already have a gazillion of them, enough to where literally with just the name brand tournaments we have, you can play in a low-level tournament every single weekend in the month of June. And that's just with Minnow Cup, Low Ink, and LSL going on. That does not include all the random weeklies that have popped up, the other Saturday tournaments that have been trying to pop their way up. There's a way too many low-level tournaments, more so than what we need right now. Would it be cool to have all these low-level tournaments once the scene is big enough to support it? Yes. I forgot about Launch Point Draft Cup. That's also going to be on Sunday, but registration is closed for that, I saw. But what we've been seeing is low-level teams or low-level players. They have an interest in making a new tournament. So what do? Well, I'm from low-level. I'll just make my own version of Little Squid League. I'm just going to copy, paste some rules, slap a random div on there like divs mean anything, and just run it. Because that's what the community needs, is more of this. In comes Infinity Cup that was run this past Saturday and at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, even though I believe this was mostly a German team that ran it. Hey, Infinity Cup, who ran that one? Well, this team called Infinity. Who? It is a German team that played in Low Ink last month, in the month of May, and made Gamma Bracket. Looking to try their hands in making a tournament. Fair enough. You know, back in the day, before IPL, and, well, maybe back in the BNS era, if you want to consider it that, most of the other, like, weekly or, like, standalone tournaments that you saw were being created by teams. It's like teams were hosting their own tournaments. Splatforce had a Saturday Night Splat Series. Fiction created that Good Guys Win tournament. Purdue had the Boilermaker Booyah tournament, just to name a few. There's probably several other examples of teams creating tournaments series and trying to host it from there. So Infinity taking their stab at it. A team that made Gamma Bracket in the last Low Ink, not only made Gamma Bracket, but got swept out of Gamma Bracket immediately on Sunday, which is a mean thing to say, but I'm pointing this out because a team like that decided to make an open invite tournament with a group stage into an alpha and beta bracket. Yes! Somebody got it right! A low-level team decided not to make a skill cap tournament and decided to make an open invite tournament. And it worked. Yes, I'm telling you guys, you don't have to make skill cap tournaments because it's not helping anything. JPEG made the analogy of a family picnic and everybody's bringing a cherry pie. Somebody brought a daggum fried chicken. Yes, and it worked out. Teams came out for this tournament. 23 of them, including some name brand teams we'll get into in a second. But was it perfect? No. No, it wasn't. There were a lot of issues with this tournament. I looked through the feedback channel. Obviously, there's some things that need to be worked on, understandably so. First time running a tournament, there's going to be some issues, but still, the feedback was presented in a positive way. Hey, I would have liked to see this in the next one, but we're going to play in the next one. We're excited. Thank you for hosting this tournament, kind of thing. So good, a lot of good things going on there. But again, it's just so refreshing. Because I called out low-level teams. I said, stop making new tournaments. Make an open invite and see what happens. And one team did reach out to me after that segment, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and said, hey, we run this low-level tournament. Do you think we should make it an open invite? And I shared my thoughts with them, which was basically like, if your tournament's already successful, do what you feel like doing, but I feel like if you're looking to help the community the most, making your tournament open invite, as scary as it might be, would be the best way to move forward. And that team, that tournament series didn't. Ultimately kept their tournament as a skill cap thing. Fair enough, so be it. They just asked for my advice. I gave it, and we still support anybody who's trying to create some sort of scene. But Infinity deserves a hell of a lot of credit here for what they pulled off, even if it wasn't as strong as what they were thinking, or didn't go as smoothly as what they might have expected. I don't know. I didn't watch the stream or even pay attention to it until a few hours before I did this episode, when I looked deeper into it, and I was like, oh, this is exactly what we've been begging people to do. And they did it. Again, all one day, group stage, seeded teams, alpha bracket, a beta bracket, so there's something for everybody to play for. 23 teams signed up for it, including Hollow, Chewits Mafia, Delicious Nuggets, and this team that I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about here, the Freelancing Takoyaki team. Who's that? That's the team that won that beta bracket of Low Inc. 2 months ago, finished 4th place in Alpha bracket last month, decided to just rip this tournament apart with those teams I just mentioned in there. They went 5-0 in group stage, one of those wins coming as a bye. 3-0, swept Chewits Mafia. They swept them. And then went into grand finals against Hollow. Yeah, they lost, but took 2 games to win against Hollow. They went 2-4 against Hollow. Hollow, an alpha bracket Low Inc. team. Taking 2nd place overall, and per games in this tournament went 18-5. Freelancing Takoyaki just flexed over everybody when they really have no business doing that. And yes, they had a sub. I know they had a sub. They had somebody from Grape Juice, which is a team that has been on the rise as of lately as well. But one player doesn't elevate. One player cannot take a Low Inc. team and elevate them to 3-0ing Chewits Mafia. As much as Chewits Mafia might be like rusty or whatever, didn't they just play in 20XX, and didn't I just praise them for being really strong in that one? Even though they went over like a different name, they were like the Fruit Mafia or something like that back then. But still, that is a quality set of wins in a great tournament run from a team that I think a lot of people were not expecting to do as well as they did. Now, it brings up the question that I brought up a couple of times, and I'm not saying anything here. I'm not breaking any news. I'm not saying, with everything I just said, the first thought in your mind is like, well, wait a minute, aren't they going to be banned from Low Inc? That's not what the Popcast is. We don't break news here, and we don't share any of that information. I'm just speculating and asking this question openly. Would you rather win Low Inc, or would you rather pop off in some other tournaments and have like JPEG and myself DM you being like, hey, we think you're too good. We don't think you should even have the opportunity to try to win Low Inc. Here's your certificate. Get out of our tournament. You are scary. You are a scary beast. The answer most of you will probably say is win Low Inc. The reason for that is that we don't celebrate low-level teams enough for the accomplishments they do in tournaments outside of low ink. We really don't. And it's not because we forget about those teams. We do. Kraken United, Heaven's Moonlight, just to name a couple of teams that we've given the certificate to. Legato said, hey, you guys haven't gotten to win low ink yet, but we're not giving you the chance to. You've popped off in these other tournaments. You deserve it. And we should be rewarding these teams. But no, whenever somebody loses to one of those teams, whoever lost to Freelancing Takoyaki, it's just like, ha, you lost to that team. You got swept by that team. How you lost to a low ink team. That means you suck. No, maybe it could just mean that low ink team is just really damn good. That could be the case as well. It doesn't have to always be putting somebody else down. You lost to that team. No, the conversation shouldn't be Chewits Mafia lost to Freelancing Takoyaki. It should be Freelancing Takoyaki beat Chewits Mafia. Do you see the difference there? That praising that one team, and we should be doing that more. When low ink teams pop off, we should be talking more positively about it. And then the conversation isn't about, oh, well, I don't get the chance to win low ink. Bruh, it's your scene is too good to be in low ink. That's the good thing. And yeah, there's no hour-long episode we do about Freelancing Takoyaki like we do specifically for low ink. There's no preview for Infinity Cup like we do for low ink as well. There's not as much clout that comes around the tournament series. I get that, but still, we got to change our mindset of what we think of these low ink teams. Because I'll tell you this is I know for a fact this is a thing. I know teams in low ink will dodge other open invite tournaments because they want to keep their eligibility for low ink. They don't want to pop off in another tournament and then be like, oh, crap, we did really well here. We're going to get banned from low ink. We want to win low ink. And I've had people DM me before in the middle of tournaments. Hey, we just beat this team. Does that mean we're banned? It's like, why is that what's on your mind in the middle of a tournament? Go keep playing. Like, why are you even concerned about that? It blows my mind. And it doesn't blow my mind. I understand it, but it's frustrating nonetheless. But still, that's why I'm giving a little bit more attention to Freelancing Takoyaki. Again, I'm not saying they're banned or anything like that, but when they go into an open invite tournament and just absolutely pop off, we got to start celebrating that. And they did. They were getting a lot of attention. People were like, hey, that Dynamo player, that vanilla Dynamo player, who I believe is the same Andu from Mahi Monsoon, if you remember that team. People were like, these guys need to be in +3. And that's great. They deserve that kind of recognition. And so does Infinity in the Infinity Cup. So there you go. I called on low level. I said, start making open invite tournaments, extend your hand, and high level teams rewarded them by signing up and playing in their tournament. If they do Infinity Cup 2, I hope it gets even more teams signed up for it. It deserves it. And for just trying to do this, I am now moving Blue Moon down from my number 1 team down to the number 2 spot. My new number 1 favorite team in low level is Infinity, unless those guys are all jerks because I don't really know them. But for at least attempting to do this, they deserve a lot of credit. So I'm pretty sure all those guys are asleep right now. But if you wake up and you see this, hats off to you, Infinity. Nice. Way to go. And that ends probably the longest episode of the Popcast we've ever had. It was a good one, though. I enjoyed it. It's not the same person that was on Mahi, says Riley. Fair enough. That's good to know. If you'd like to be a part of the Popcast in any way, feel free to reach out to me at my socials below. Twitter, Mr_Popgun, Discord, Popgun, #5882, YouTube at Popgun, 25 Popgun, Twitch at Popgun25, Anchor.fm/Popgun. TikTok at Mr_Popgun. We'll have a lot of stuff to talk about next week, but if we can fit in a a guest segment, I'd be happy to do that as well. I believe Falco has suggested that I raid this person in the past, so let's do that again. Hey, get vaccinated, stay safe, enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for watching. Good episode. It was a fun one. Unless it wasn't.